Welcome to Inspire, the Angel Flores podcast, where you'll be inspired, equipped, and entertained. This podcast is sponsored by Mosaic Church, a church for people who don't really like church. To learn more about Mosaic, please visit our website at greeleymosaic.com.
Thank you for coming and being a part of this. Thanks for doing this. So we are cousins.
Correct.
But we grew up, when you're growing up, even if you're 2 or 3 years apart, there's almost a generational disconnect. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
So we had that. And so growing up, our moms are sisters or were raised like sisters. And I was closer in age to your youngest brother. But so let's start out with born and raised and that kind of stuff.
I was born in Greeley, Colorado, raised in Gilchrist all my life. Went to school at Valley High School. That's where I knew Diane from.
All right. Go Big Vikes.
Yeah, go Vikes. And I guess that's kind of why I didn't know you as well, because you were from Fort Lupton.
Right.
Yeah, so a little bit of a rivalry.
Not everyone was as fortunate to grow up in Fort Lupton. Anyway.
Right. Says
yeah,
nobody.
our high schools were rivals.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Still are, I think.
Yes, yeah. But a great school. And
how many in your graduating class? Do you remember?
I think we had probably 80 in our class.
So a smaller school
yes,
for sure, yeah.
Yes, definitely. Rural, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the dynamics of Valley High School because there was a lot of Latinos. There were a lot of white kids. And, I wouldn't say it was 50-50, but everybody got along.
Good.
And it was awesome. I mean, you see a lot of kids nowadays, they don't get along as well, but everybody was great there. So
good.
It was a good school.
And then were you an athlete in school?
I was. I played volleyball, basketball, and I ran track.
Okay.
So
all 4 years?
All 4 years, volleyball and basketball, and track 3 years, 3 of the 4 years.
And so I'm going to skip ahead and then we're going to come back.
Yeah, for sure.
So you were recently inducted into the High School Coaching Hall of Fame.
Colorado High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame. Yeah.
All right.
There's a couple of different Hall of Fames.
For coaching volleyball?
Correct.
So how many state championships did you have?
We had 2 state championships. We had 7 runner-ups.
Okay.
So more silvers than gold. And then...
You wince when you say that.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Yeah, it did. And then we had 2 third places, and then 1 we finished, we don't know where, tied for 5th or something like that.
Cool. So pretty illustrious career for sure.
Yes, for sure. It was a great career. And the runner-ups that we had, a lot of them were to the private schools.
Okay.
And I know when your niece Aisha Flores played for us, the team that we lost, 3-4 years in a row to, they had girls that were all going to the Division I volleyball circuit after they graduated.
So they were recruiting girls.
Yeah, it's easier for them to.
What school was that?
St. Mary.
Oh, St. Mary.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Come on. Named after the great St. Mary. And we're doing, that's just the reality of that.
Right, it is.
But that must feel even better knowing you guys weren't recruiting. You were raising up girls that were from the area.
Absolutely.
And doing something amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the questions I had one time it was a Rocky Mountain news reporter, and he said, Rene, how do you get, and I'm going to paraphrase his wording, but how do you get these little Mexicans to perform for you? Because most of the kids were Mexican, American
Hispanic
kids.
Descent,
yeah.
Average height of 5.
Yeah, 5'4".
Maybe.
Yeah. And he's like, how do you get them to perform for you? And I thought about it and I was like, you give them an opportunity like you do everybody else.
Right.
And
so you weren't cherry picking your team?
No, for sure. If I would have been grabbing those 6-foot girls that were not doing anything at home.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So then was volleyball your favorite sport in school, or how did you end up focusing on volleyball?
when I started high school, basketball was my favorite sport because I never played volleyball in middle school. I didn't think I liked it. But my friend, Chris Alexander, at the time, she told me, you got to play volleyball. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. So I tried it and I fell in love with it, and the rest is history.
So where'd you go to school after high school?
After high school, I played 1 year at Utah Valley. Well, it's Utah Tech. It's Utah Valley now. It used to be Utah Tech.
All right.
And it was the first year of volleyball there, and we were horrible. So it was hard going from a really successful program to playing in a really bad one.
Oh,
so
not used to losing.
Yeah, but it was okay though.
Were you guys champs when you were in school?
No, the best we ever did was third place. My oldest sister, Roberta, they were the only state champs.
Oh, okay.
So winning our state championship in 2010 was my first state championship for volleyball.
Wow. So then played 1 year in college.
1 year in college. I got pregnant.
Okay.
And
that'll do it.
Yeah. I came home and I had my daughter, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And, I coached at Alexander Dawson for a season there.
Where's that at?
It's in Lafayette. It's a private school.
Okay.
And it was their first year, so we were really bad. These kids were really rich kids, so they came from all over the United States. And it was kind of sad because, their parents weren't around. And
so no fans or
no
anything
fans,
like that.
yeah. But they loved learning, and, we got better as the season went along. And
okay. And then what?
And then I went to school, I got a job at at IBM first, and I worked there for a little bit. And then I went to Ball Aerospace, and I worked there.
What were you doing?
I was a configuration and data manager. So my husband wanted me to make sure I mentioned that I worked on the Hubble space telescope. So
cool.
Yeah, it was awesome working on that. The job wasn't always
awesome.
Yeah, awesome, because you work with a bunch of engineers that are don't have a lot of personality, and you hate to say that, but
nothing against engineers.
right. But so, yeah.
How did you meet your husband?
Dan. Okay, so I was the configuration manager on this program, and he was the lead electrical engineer. And my job was, once the design had been created, I'm sorry, I'm going to hang on just a second. I'm going to shut my watch off because it keeps dinging. Okay. So once the drawings were created, then for configuration, I had to make sure that we were able to make them. So I had to say, this is wrong. This is right, or this is wrong. And then the engineers would look at them, review them, and say, I agree to these changes, and it's okay. And so
how did you have the background to do that?
You know what? I just kind of got thrown into it. So I had a really good mentor at the time there. Her name was Katie. She's from Fort Lupton High School, graduated from Fort Lupton. But she really helped me a lot and showed me what I need to look for on the design.
Okay.
And then
so they trained you on the job.
Yes.
Basically. Okay.
Yes. And then I just took it and went with it. One thing my dad always told me, when you go to work, don't let anybody ever call you lazy. You always go harder, you work harder, you prove yourself.
Yes.
And so that was that helped. But anyway, so that was my training, and it worked out well. And
so how'd you meet?
So I saw this picture of Dan. I mean, I had to have Dan sign off on this drawing. So I go to his office, and there's a picture of this young girl, blonde, blue-eyed girl on his desk. And I'm like, this guy's weird. He's 29 years old, and he has this young girl on his desk. I thought, that's not right. But then I find out later that it's his sister. And I thought, who puts their sister on their desk? That is so sweet.
Now he's a
good guy.
You're weird to you're awesome.
Yeah. And he came
Shout
down.
out to Dan.
Yes. And he came down into my cubby one day to sign off on some drawings. and we talked, and it was during lunch hour that he did this. So we talked our entire lunch hour, and I told the girl next to me, he doesn't know this, but he's going to marry me. Well, I know, right? Isn't that funny how
and you know.
When God knows, he lets you know. But I had forgotten I said that. So when he asked me to marry me, she reminded me. Yeah. So
there is something, the Bible doesn't, the Bible says, speak those things that are not as though they are.
Right.
And so when people talk about manifesting or whatever, right, there is a biblical precedent to that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened.
I think so.
Called your shot.
Yeah.
So then you guys got married. How long have you guys been married?
We have been married. In March, it will be 94. So 29 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So almost 30 years.
Okay. And you had a daughter.
We had a daughter together.
Okay.
And Beth is his daughter. And he will tell you that. I made the mistake one time as introducing Beth. This is my daughter, meaning, not that he wasn't her
right.
daughter,
Yeah. You just said it. Yeah.
And he was like, that's our daughter. I was like, okay. So, but yeah, we had another daughter, and her name is Corey. And she, both of my daughters played volleyball for me. The youngest one was a little bit more serious, went on and played at the University of Wyoming. So,
okay.
It was good.
Nothing against Beth.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't her thing.
No, that's right.
All right. So then how did you end up coaching?
So, I was coaching at the middle school level, and just because they couldn't find a coach, so I said,
you jumped in, and
because Beth was playing at the time.
Okay.
So then the high school coach, the position came open, and they were doing interviews, and the AD at the time, Jeff Cogburn, said, "Hey, would you be interested in sitting on this interview committee?" I said, "Sure." So they hired this guy. His name was Charlie, and he was volleyball knowledge and skills and everything challenged. And the girls went through one summer with him, doing summer league. And a lot of them said, if he coaches, we're not playing.
Oh.
So Jeff had it tough. And he's asked, would you be doing this? I said, yeah, but we can't get rid of Charlie. Let's keep him at the C team level, which is our bottom level. I don't, that's not right.
You don't want to just get rid of the guy. Yeah.
And and I told Jeff, I'll coach Jeff, but just for 1 year. After 1 year, if you're not happy, let's move on. You find another coach. And he said, okay.
What year was that?
Oh gosh, let's see. I don't remember what year. I coached 20 years. So 20 years take away from 16 is what?
So 96. So let's talk a little bit now about coaching. What first day of practice, kids come in, young ladies come in, especially ladies who you haven't coached before. It's probably rare for them to make the team if they've never played, right? There's usually girls that are going to make the team have been playing since they were little. Is that a fair statement, or what's your thoughts on that?
Not always.
Club and all that kind of stuff.
Not always, because and that even makes it harder when they've been playing longer and they're still volleyball challenged.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
But sometimes that even makes it harder. Well, and the parents are telling you.
They have this expectation.
Yes. Well, our kids have been playing club. We've been paying this much money for them to play club, and you're not letting her play. So, and usually my expectations start at the beginning of the season before our first day of volleyball. I used to come up with a volleyball contract.
Oh, okay.
And I'd put everything in it that I expected from them. And it's usually a collaboration of my coaches and myself. What do you think about this and that? And,
So you're very clear up front.
Yes.
This is what it means to be a part of
yes.
this the Valley Vikings volleyball team.
Yeah.
So how did you come up? Did you do that right away, or was that something you figured out along? Like, we need to have a contract,
right?
Okay.
It was mostly set up just for training rules, because I had coaches that were very big sticklers on, no drinking, no partying, no. And so I wanted to make sure that was in there. So that's kind of how it started.
Okay.
And that was our first
It's hard
year.
to hold someone accountable if they've never been told the rules.
Right.
You're just like, what's the matter with you?
Or if they're in writing. So we could say, see,
You
this is
signed
what you signed.
Mhm.
Mom and dad see what you signed.
Mm.
But so, and we just would add to them as situations would occur, or if we foresaw problems.
Would a kid get famous if you made a rule because of them?
No, but we did have drills that
No
kids,
driving naked.
Yeah.
Here's one.
Yeah, definitely. No. So pretty much, I mean, yeah, our expectations were laid out for him before. And I think the biggest one was you are guaranteed 0 playing time. So
no matter who you are.
No matter who you are, whether you're my number 1 or my number 55.
So last year you were our how do you say that? Libero?
Libero.
Libero. Last year you're our libero. This year, which is like are they like the quarterback of the team? What is their role?
No, your setter's more like your quarterback of the team. Your libero is your defensive specialist.
Oh, okay.
And they go in for your back row players that aren't as strong maybe, or like they're so strong that you want them in their 6 rotations, but they're too, usually at Valley, it was too short to play the front row and they couldn't jump, because I've had short players that played front row but jump out of the gym. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
But so if they're really talented but they're not going to be able to make blocks,
right?
They play libero.
Yes, typically sometimes, yeah. I mean, or they're just great defensively. Like they can read a hitter on the other team. They can dig a ball, somewhere, anywhere on the court.
Gotcha. Okay. So if that was you last season, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because we're starting all over again.
And not even last year, every day at practice. I mean, I would do stats on the kids and say, hey, this kid's looking really good. Let's take an extra look at them, see how they progress throughout the week. Are they going to be this strong on Thursday or Friday? And, you just got to keep giving kids opportunities. And it doesn't matter, where they're at. My oldest daughter, she did great defensively, but in the front row, she started not playing so well. And guess what? She got replaced in the front row, and that was hard for her. But it's like,
let's talk about that for a second.
Yes.
So that'll make the breakfast table a little awkward.
Yes. It did.
How did you navigate that? Because I'm sure there's coaches watching that are in that spot.
Yes.
So what advice or how did you do it?
Well, I always tried to leave volleyball practice at volleyball practice, but of course it always doesn't. And especially with Corey, Beth could take it a little bit better. Corey had a hard time. I had kicked 2 kids out of my practice, and they are both my daughters.
In your whole career?
In my whole career.
2 kids out.
Yes.
Get out.
Yeah.
And they're your kids.
Yes. Because you have higher expectations for your own kids, because you don't want to let anybody think that you're favoring them.
Right. Yeah.
Even my cousins, Aisha, there were times when I would have to get harder on her than I would other kids.
Right.
Is it a bad thing? Probably not. I think they develop a tougher skin.
Okay. It's good for them ultimately.
Yes. Yeah. And it wasn't ugly or malicious. It was just, this is what we have to do, because I don't want anybody to say you didn't earn this. Not that I gave it to you, but that you didn't earn it.
So you're doing them a favor.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
They didn't always see that. No. Especially my youngest one. I think, she would, go cry to dad more than Beth would. And, well, she's just so mean to me, or whatever. But it was it is what it is.
I did not expect that. That was amazing. So what was, how did you create the culture, like first day of practice? So you have the contracts, the kids know more or less, here's the expectations.
Right.
So then what's a first practice like? What are you doing? What are you talking about?
The contract is a good test. The second thing is we did tons of conditioning. Like our first week, the the coaches and I would call it our weeding out.
Oh, wow.
And
would you have kids quit because of it?
Oh, yeah. We usually could count on about 3 or 4 kids quitting. And, when they quit playing for us, we might ask them, well, would you be interested in being a manager? Because they obviously went out for the team because they wanted to be part of something.
Right, yeah.
So we say, would you like to be a manager? But I mean, our conditioning, we do 2-a-days for a week, and they weren't easy. Like, we would have wrestlers come in and condition with our girls because they work so hard.
Because it was so intense.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, but it was such a good feeling for them. And I went through the same thing with my volleyball coach. So I knew what they were getting.
Yeah.
So.
And you knew how it felt
right
at the end of the week, even to feel stronger, faster.
Yes. And, we'd call it the Miracle Mile. We'd have them run the streets in Gilchrist for a mile. And that last mile on that Friday, it was awesome because the older kids that are the more seasoned kids, the kids that were in better shape, would go back and run with some of the younger kids or, and it just gives you goosebumps and you're clapping for them.
Yes.
And, it was awesome. It's just creating a culture of success,
camaraderie.
Yes.
Yes. That you're changing lives there.
Yes.
You're implanting things in them that maybe no one else has ever exposed them to or implanted in them. So what was it like as the season started to progress, right? You're getting closer to your first game, let's say. What are you guys talking about? What are you thinking about? Are you having conversations with kids about how would you come up with like the starting rosters and that kind of stuff? Okay.
So you have, at a 3A level, you have a variety of levels, right? You have your really good athletes, and then we used to call them our Scoobs, like the Scooby-Doo, cartoons. But so, we'd break them up into teams at first off. And then, as I said, a C team, JV, varsity. And at Valley, we had no cut policy.
Okay.
So we couldn't cut our kids.
They would just go to C team.
Yeah. Or
did a senior go to C team?
No, we had to carry them, or they sit the bench. And at that point, you're giving them, this is how much I'm seeing you playing right now. And then usually it's followed by the kid saying, well, what do I need to do to play more?
Or forget this.
Yes,
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Or, hey, I'm going to go talk to my mom and she's going to come talk to you.
All right. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
How did you deal with parents coming and saying, my little girl, she played all 4 years she was playing for, one of these big clubs. I don't want to name any of the clubs in Northern Colorado, but the big volleyball clubs. And now you're not seeing what the rest of us are obviously seeing, the prodigy that my daughter is, right? And you're just like, she's terrible. Like, how did you deal with?
Well, I know in past, like, coaches had a closed door policy. And so people couldn't come in, their parents couldn't come in. But I welcomed parents to come in. And so when a parent would come and say, you're not giving her an opportunity, I'd give her. And I'd say, I give her opportunity every time she shows up for practice. And you're more than welcome to come watch. I had a parent show up probably 3-4 days out of the week.
Just to watch practice?
Yeah, just to watch practice. How
does that create a hostile environment?
Not for me, because I had nothing to hide. And if I had expectations for Susie, I held the same expectations for that parent's child. And
you can say her name. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And she, if they couldn't see that, then, and I think it was good.
Any reasonable parent would see.
Yeah. I had a parent one time walk in and said, I want to know why my daughter isn't playing in the back row, because I had a really good little libero. And I said, because this libero is better than she is. I said, she works harder, and your daughter is the best athlete on this team right now. and it was Corey's senior year. And he said, well, she should be playing back row then. And I said, no, because she's not doing what I'm asking her to do. And I said, come into one of my conditioning practices on Friday and watch her condition. And that's how my practice is with her. She's a great athlete. She's great in the front row for me. So come watch. So he walked in, saw this conditioning. I used to call it a 20-minute conditioning. And we do, like, they go around the gym and we squats, burpees, sit-ups, everything.
That sounds awful.
It was awful. Yeah. And he saw it, and 10 minutes in, he gets up, he goes, I've seen enough, and he walks out, and I never heard another thing from him.
So he saw it.
He saw it. So, and that's why I think it's good to be honest to kids and to parents. And it was hard sometimes. Sometimes you didn't know why parents were mad at you. So you don't know what kids are telling them, but I always welcomed them if they, had questions.
As human beings, we tend to paint ourselves in the best possible light.
Right.
I'm sure it's very rare, if ever, did a kid go home and say, I'm not working hard, and so coach isn't playing me. They're not going to go home and say that. Yeah.
I had a kid one time. We went to a camp in the summer, and the coach from CSU was so excited. He's like, I like your team, but this kid, she was a middle player. She needs to learn how to transition off. I said, I know, I've been working on her, showing her footwork, everything. She goes home and tells her dad, the coach from CSU said that I should be starting and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, that's not the conversation we had. And so he was angry with me, got his daughter's uniform, came over to my house first off. It wasn't even during school. And my daughter she was just like in middle school, I think. He gets her jersey and throws it at me and said, your teams are going to blank for the rest of, forever.
Your tenure or whatever, right?
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And Corey's in the background. Let him have it, Mom. I'm like, oh my gosh, where did you learn that?
So how did you, there's a great lesson in handling criticism here.
Right.
How did you handle criticism? I mean, I joked with you before we started that you probably never got criticized, but the truth is anyone doing anything, anyone leading anything, anyone trying or attempting anything is going to be criticized by people who don't know what they're talking about or are afraid to try themselves or whatever, right? Like there's always, I had someone on one of my podcasts say, I really enjoyed this, but I wish the interviewer knew what he was doing. And so, anytime you try anything, someone's got something to say.
Absolutely.
Right? So how did you handle that?
Well, I think you have to listen to the criticism first. Okay. And does it have any value in it? What can I do better? I mean, because.
So as painful as it was, you
have to
evaluate it. Yeah.
Yeah. You look at yourself and say, is there any truth to this? And is there any truth to what they're saying? And if there isn't, or if there is, just say, okay, or where are they coming from then? Where are they getting this? And then maybe sit down with them and understand, how can you help me understand what you're saying? Is this what you're saying? Am I really hearing this? Or, maybe I'm being too sensitive and maybe they're not saying that. So,
what would you look for? You need leaders on the court, right? You need somebody who's going to be the quarterback out there essentially. And so, I mean, you can only say so much from the side. You really need somebody among the team to lead. What would you look for, and how would you nurture that? Or do you think it's nature? Do you think they're born with it? How would you teach them? How would you coach, encourage leaders? What do you look for in leaders?
Well, I think it's a little bit of, both. They're born with it. Sometimes you don't want that kind of a leader out there on the court, because sometimes you have leaders that tend to be more negative.
Oh, okay.
And kids still look up to them because, for whatever reason,
they're popular in class or whatever, right?
Yeah. But on the court, I try to, if you see that, then you try to, okay, this is kind of what we need or whatever. Usually, typically, my leaders were my setters. They were more vocal.
Okay.
I would encourage them to be, they're running the plays. Your setters are, they're like your quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
They're running your plays. They're, setters take a lot of responsibility on themselves. They have to make, okay, this kid's hot, this kid's not. They're doing a lot of that in their own head.
Okay. So they're deciding who they're setting to.
Yes, unless they're not doing it, then you're on the sideline telling them.
Okay.
Yes. So a little bit of both.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And if you saw a player be negative or berating other players or just doing something that you're like, that's not okay, how did you guys deal with it? Either in the moment or in practice or both?
It was handled in the moment.
Okay.
I mean, if me or one of the coaches saw it,
Mm-hmm.
it was an automatic pull.
Okay.
And say, this is what coach saw. And they're either going to admit to it or not admit to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you just sit them out on the bench. And when you're ready to go in and be a team player, then you let me know. And I've done that a couple of times.
Okay.
So, when you set up your expectations, that's also in there.
Oh.
These are your teammates. I don't care what's going on at school, even though I did. Because,
well, it influences what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
But
she's dating her ex-boyfriend.
Yes, exactly. And there was conflict out there at times, and I didn't even know it because they would come into the court and it was all out. It was done until they were out of practice or out of a game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
But sometimes that would show itself.
Yes.
And then you have to be the one like
step in. Yeah.
What's going on?
Oh yeah. And then sometimes I wouldn't know, and a player would come to me and say, hey, this is going on. And so then we'd have a team meeting, and and sometimes those team meetings were better than a practice because you can get it all out and sit down and say, okay, I had a player one time tell me, you treat these players different than you treat me. And this was a starter, and this was a relative. And I said, you know what? You're right. And I treat all of my players different. I can't treat them the same because some of these players treat me differently. And so I have a different relationship with some. I can't have the same relationship with every kid, even though I would like it to be.
It's just not realistic.
Perfect. It's not realistic. So, and I know there are kids that didn't like me.
Right.
And there was a couple of players I could say that I didn't really care for, but I still treated them with respect. And
so I used to teach at UNC, taught at Ames, and I've spoken at a bunch of schools. And I would often have students come and talk to me and say, well, there's a teacher that doesn't like me, right? That's such a common,
right.
And on one hand, it's a cop-out, right? The coach doesn't like me.
Right.
On the other hand, sometimes it's true.
Right.
I had students I didn't like, you know what I mean? But it's an important life skill to develop because you're going to have bosses you don't like. You're going to have coworkers that you don't like or don't like you.
Yep.
So I think it's an important life skill for girls on a volleyball team or any sports team to learn how to navigate. We're all trying to get this thing done. I have to do it with people I don't necessarily care for.
Right.
So am I going to quit or am I going to just make it happen?
Perfect. That's
hard.
what you have to do. It is hard, and it's easier said than done.
Right.
Because a lot of times you don't know what's going on with your players.
And I'm sure it comes out though, right? You're just watching them and you're like, something's up with her.
Right.
Would you pull them aside? Would you wait till after practice?
Usually if they were giving attitude to another player, like, if I had there were times when I had a hitter that would, get angry at a setter for not giving her the perfect set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, really, there's no such thing as a perfect set. There's a perfect hit ball. So you can better that ball. But, you can't get a set to the same spot every single time.
Right.
You've got to be a better hitter.
Just the physics of
the
ball, the human body.
Yes.
Yeah. She's a little more tired than she was last time.
Yes. Yeah. There's no such thing. I mean, so I think when you explain things to kids,
Mm-hmm.
they get it. They finally get it. The player that said, "You don't like me, you like them more," she ended up later in her later years apologizing and I'm sorry I put you through that. It's like, you're a teenager, I get it.
Right, yeah. There's a lot of hormones. There's a lot
Yes.
going on, yeah. How talk a little bit about the pressure of a championship game. So there was like regionals. You win regionals. Now you go to state, and it's a tournament at state, correct?
Yes.
So how did that all work?
For the first 7 years before we went to state for the first time, we always did really well in our league. We were always winning teams, but just even getting to regionals was a chore. Once we got to regionals, then our next goal was state.
So not everybody goes to regionals even?
No, not everybody.
Right.
I think it's the 16. Back in the day, it was a top 16, and then it was final 8.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And that's who went to state?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And then I think the last few years that I coached, it was like 12 teams that went up to state because they felt there was too much representation in the plains, like Colorado Springs to Greeley area, instead of the Western Slope area.
So they opened it up for more teams.
For more teams.
Did Fort Lupton ever knock you guys out?
No.
Come on, Fort Lupton.
No. But one time when my sister was coaching for Fort Lupton, one of my players she had scoliosis, and she was my big gun. And her back was really bothering her. And so I didn't let her play the first set or second set because I want her to be able to walk when she's 50 years old, right?
Yeah.
So Fort Lupton they weren't going to beat us. And they ended up beating us.
Oh, wow. And it was your sister you were playing against?
Yes. So that made her career, I think.
Roberta, if you're listening.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about influential people that have helped you, or when you think of, I always like to say, who would be on your Mount Rushmore? Like if you were going to build your own Mount Rushmore of people who've been really influential in your life, who would that be?
Well, I have a lot of influential people, but like I look at you and Diane, and and I'm not kissing up or anything, but I love to watch you preach.
Oh,
just because you're so happy, you're jovial, you tell your little jokes, and I love humor.
Oh, right.
And I think that's a good way to get to people. And I love Diane because she's always happy. You could tell she serves.
Right, yeah.
And she's just so happy. And to me, even before you asked me to do this, I was like, wow, that's how I want to be.
Oh,
that's
cool.
how I want to serve
you.
God. Okay, but anyway, so my other 3 influential people were, I think my dad would be my number one. He was a coach, and I remember they didn't have softball back in my day when I was young, growing up, but he coached Little League Baseball. And the first year that they ever allowed girls to play baseball, we were in a tournament in Eaton, and he let me play, me and my cousin Laverne. And I didn't get to play at all until the last inning, and we won. But it was such a good lesson because I used to go to all the games, but I got to watch him coach and how he interacted with the players. Like we had a family down the street that, the mom was raising them. They were poor, and how he treated them just like he did, the Richie Riches on our team, on the team.
Yeah.
Yes. And, and I learned how to sit the bench with humility,
right, yeah.
And it was good for me. So he's probably my number one. My second one would be Mr. Kippas. He was my high school basketball coach. And before he was coach, my freshman year, I played basketball, but I wasn't allowed to play varsity because, I played varsity, but I sat the bench because the girl in front of me was older, a senior, and she had to have, play before me. So
what was her name? Just kidding.
yeah, no. And then, so when he came in and took the program over, he allowed me to become a starter.
Oh, wow.
And so I was
Could
like,
not have been a good political decision for him.
no, and and it, especially when it was Raj Chacon, Sylvia Chacon, Rene Chacon, Laverne Chacon, all starters, and then Janet Crespin. Janet, and she was something else then, but she wasn't a Crespin. But so yeah, it was, he just made you realize that you work hard, it pays off. And that's kind of what I learned from him. And, be honest, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from.
You got an honest shot at your spot.
Yes.
Which is, that's important when you feel like, if I do the work, this is going to pay off.
Yes.
Instead of the political stuff that might be around, that you can't have any, you have no control over when you're 16 or 17 or whatever. Interesting. Good.
Yeah. And then my third person was my volleyball coach in high school, Ann McKay. And she taught me how to love the game and fall in love with it. And, again, she was an amazing coach. And I remember playing a team like a Frederick, because they were horrible. And so instead of letting us, come home victorious, and everything.
25-0.
Yeah. She would make us stay and play, coach the other kids from Frederick.
Oh, wow.
So that they could become better, because she wanted the sport of volleyball to be big.
Wow.
And so the only way she saw that coming is if we grew it. And it did.
Help the competition get better. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
And you don't see that nowadays. It's like, I'm going to get you.
We're going to run up the score. We're going to, which is really gross.
It is
when you
gross.
see teams do that,
I know.
What do you get out of that? I mean,
exactly.
There's some really warped sense of self-importance if you have to do that kind of stuff.
I agree. Yeah. I had, I used to work a lot I worked with Courtney Lockie. She was a hitter out of Eaton, and some of the setters out of Platte Valley. They were competitors, and people would ask me, "Why are you doing that?"
Or you would coach them like privately, or
yeah, and I'm like, because they've asked, they want to get better,
right?
And if I can help them, let's do it.
Yes, because that'll ultimately make your team better,
right?
And I mean, that's not why you're doing it.
No.
But if you teach those girls to get better, rising tide lifts all boats. So your girls have to get better to compete.
Right.
Yeah, that's a win. Yeah. Favorite childhood memory?
I think just growing up, I have a lot of them. I mean, we were poor, but a lot of good memories. I remember going next door to the empty field and playing baseball with all of Gilchrist, it seemed like, boys and, girls, if we were lucky enough to play, and then playing Condao, Mexican tag at night.
Oh, yeah.
Until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Didn't have cell phones, so they couldn't call us to get home. Hey, it's dark. You knew you had to be home. But we weren't afraid of people kidnapping us or,
it was a different time for sure.
Different time for sure. And going to Aunt Faye's and having those big family dinners on Sundays, and, going to my grandma's, watching her cook, make her tamales, her famous tamales. Yeah, lots of good memories growing up.
At what point did you think we could maybe win this? We could be the team that does it. Like, how do you communicate that to the team? How do you communicate that to the other coaches? Like, or because I've been a part of coaching staffs too that are like, every year, we're going to go all the way. And we know we're not going to go all the way. You know what I mean? Like, but you want the best out of the kids, but at the same time, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think watching my dad was a successful Little League Pee Wee baseball. It was always Valley and Eaton, back in the day. And we used to beat Eaton back in the day. And I just watching some of those athletes that he coached go on to high school and win state championships, and, the community coming together. So I always loved that aspect of our community coming together. I know, in the last few years that we coached, we had some of the biggest crowds, bigger than our football crowds.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was so good for the community.
Mhm.
So I always loved that part of it, and
Yeah.
always tried to draw that out, and it worked. And did I think we would ever get to state? I knew we would. I just didn't know how to get there the first 7 years. And I remember every year that we didn't go to state, it was hard for me to go watch the state tournament. But one year I made myself go, and I said, okay, what are they doing that you're not doing? And so I came back with, they're taller than us. There was nothing I could do about that. What can you do besides that? Well, if you can't put up a block, you got to teach your kids how to play some serious defense. So we would work defensive drills all the time. And we had some girls that can block pretty well for as short as we were. We'd get touches on them and slow down the ball, and that would be great. But I mean, our team was notorious for the defense we played. I'd make up drills like, okay, here's this ball clear over here on this other court. We're not even practicing. Come touch it. And they take off running, and they tried to get a hand on it. First few times they couldn't, and then they touch it. And then they're bringing it up, and they're bringing it onto the court. And every time that they accomplish something, they just try harder.
Yes.
And they had that, we can do this. And I've seen it follow through in their lives. Like, we got successful nurses, PAs, engineers, mothers,
right,
everything. And I hope I had a little part of that.
Yes, no doubt you did. Yeah.
I hope so.
What, when you think of talking about successes, which is wonderful, but something that people don't talk a lot about is failures and what that teaches us. What kind of failures did you experience, and what did that?
Having a successful regular season and then not making it out of regional tournament when we were expected to, that was hard. So those are some of my failures, not accomplishing what this team could accomplish. And so then you have to evaluate, were your goals for them realistic? So.
Yeah, I heard. I think it was the coach. That was for the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles. I think he said, coaching is easier when you have good players, right?
Right.
There's some truth to that.
Absolutely.
But when you don't have good players,
right.
I mean, you can only take so much so far.
Right.
Right. So where was the balance or the mix in your mind?
Well, I had another relative, she played for us, and she struggled defensively, and I could not break her. So, I mean, what it takes is for you to just spend time with that kid one-on-one. This is what you're doing. Let me show you. And you got to figure out how they learn. Some kids you can just talk to and they get it. Some kids you have to show this is what you're doing. Some kids you just have to keep practicing, and so it becomes a habit. And eventually she got it. And, I think we ended up in second place that year too with her. So, I mean, and that team shouldn't have been as high as we were. We played University, and they beat us pretty bad during regular season, and we ended up in championship. So it's just, you just keep practicing them. The kids that don't have that God-given talent, you just keep working with them and give them the encouragement. Because sometimes you look down the bench and there's nobody else that can go in for them. They're even worse, and it's like, okay, well, this is what we got to do.
We're not deep.
Yeah, we're not deep.
All right. 2 more questions.
Okay.
Well, no, you brought me a book.
Yes.
And tell me about the book. And
it's by Dr. Sri.
I'll put it in the show notes if anybody wants to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. He's awesome. He's written a lot of books, but this one's on the 4 cardinal virtues.
Okay.
And it's just really good. It makes you it connects a lot of life, and it's called the art of living. And it actually, if you're following this, it makes the art of living so much better. It's really good. I think you're going to like it.
Okay.
You'll have to let me know.
Do you know the 4 virtues?
There's a lot of virtues, and these are sub virtues.
All right.
So I wrote them down because we haven't gone over all of them.
You're taking a class on this right now.
Yes, I am, on Tuesdays. One of the biggest one, I think, is recognizing when you do something that you always think of God at the end. This is why I'm doing this. And for God, and I think if we did more of that, our lives would be happier.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. And I think that's why you and Diane are so happy.
There is great peace in recognizing that you're not doing this alone.
Yes.
That God is with us. And so when you're not carrying the weight of life by yourself,
right?
God, we're in this together, and whatever happens, we're a team. And so if I fall on my face, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're a team. And if I succeed, that's great too. But I didn't do it by myself. So I can't get arrogant if I succeeded, and I can't beat myself up too hard if I fail, because we're a team.
That's right.
There's a tremendous amount of peace that comes from that.
Being humble, being the humility of it all. My husband said, when they gave me this award, I didn't tell anybody. And then the day that I
found out in the Tribune.
I was like, please don't tell anybody, Dan, I'm going to tell you this. We're going to have to go down to the state tournament. And he's like, what? Why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, well, it's not a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh. And, so he's like, I just can't believe you didn't even say it. But, it's like, I didn't do it by myself. The big guy helped me.
Right.
And believe me, those 7 years we didn't go to state, I was like, okay, I got to say a 90-day novena. I'm going to, I said prayers, and it just wasn't our time.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
When you guys won, right? So the state championship is usually played in what month?
November.
Okay. So November. So let's say it's November 20th and you just won. How long are you taking it off before you go, well, are we going to do it again? What's next? Like, how long would you guys take off?
Well, I didn't coach club. I coached club for Corey's team. So we usually started up in January, because I believe in club volleyball, but I don't believe in club volleyball when they say, if you play our club, and pay $3,500, I'm going to make sure you're, playing at the high school level and maybe even the college level.
Yeah, we'll get some scouts looking at you. And all
right.
That.
And that's not realistic. That's what I hate about club.
Okay.
What I like about club is that, kids that aren't multi-athletes get to continue playing if they want to.
Okay.
So go ahead.
If you were raising your kids again, would you have them play club, or would you have them be multi-sport athletes?
Both of my girls played club.
Okay.
And that was their choice. Corey was a multi-sport athlete. Beth just played volleyball. And I think I like the multi-sport, especially smaller schools, because you don't have a lot of athletes that can play all the sports. So I think they should be playing for their school.
Okay.
Whether it be basketball or
running track,
whatever, doing something besides one sport, and making somebody rich.
Yeah.
And when Corey played for us, we had our own club, and all we charged kids was the tournament fee, their uniforms, and travel if they want to.
Describe a little bit, because there's people listening that have no idea what club is or what club volleyball is, or just describe a little bit, just so people understand what we're talking about.
Okay, club volleyball is it's like volleyball from like the week after state volleyball tournament in November it can go all the way till June and July. And you're playing 5 or 6 tournaments. And then on top of that, you can travel, your team can travel. And the whole, I think it's gotten lost. A lot of it used to be a lot smaller, but it's a lot bigger now.
Mm-hmm.
People are making money. You have different levels. You have your, big clubs that I'm not going to name names that make,
Let's just name names. Just kidding.
that charge they can charge up. You can pay up to like 10 grand with all the travel, your fees, your uniforms. And then you have other clubs that aren't as expensive, and you still have good quality coaches there.
Right.
I'm going to do a shout out to my cousin Laverne's Houston. She has Club One, and it's not as expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And
I saw her Saturday. As a matter of fact, we went to watch someone play, and
nice.
She was there.
Yeah, and they're more into if kids want to play, they can come play here at a decent price.
Got it.
And still have some good coaches. So.
Good. 2 more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you seen God in all of it? Well, we'll come back to that one. The word successful. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to be successful in life. We have a lot of young leaders that watch or listen to the podcast. What does that word mean to you, successful? Maybe as a coach or in volleyball. And are you successful? What does that word mean?
Well, volleyball is such a little part of my life. And I think our program has been successful. And I think it's because of the kids. But I think most of all, it's because of God. I mean, all glory is His. And so without His will, we couldn't be where we were. And do I say that all the time? No. Do I believe that? Yes, I do believe that.
The where the rubber meets the road is when you say, we lost. And Lord, it's okay.
It is okay.
Because if He's with me on the top, I've got to have Him with me at the bottom. You know what I mean? And sometimes people say, well, if God's with me, why am I failing? Why am I struggling? Why am I losing?
Yeah. And I had to look at myself and say, God, why? It's because you're not putting in. You can't just practice them, take him to summer camps. You have to put extra time in there too. And you gotta give thanks, and you gotta pray, and you gotta not pray for the other team to do bad, but pray
that you do your best.
Yes.
And then be happy, I guess, with whatever.
Yeah, win or lose. We learn every time you lose, you learn something.
That's good. Last question. So where have you seen God in all of it? You just kind of answered that, but big picture.
Big picture. Well, I think answering my prayers, and not just for winning, but, for the success of my kids, watching my kids become successful. And I don't mean my daughters, but I mean all the kids that I've coached. Like I said, we have it's got to be,
over 20 years.
Yes.
It's got to be hundreds of girls.
Hundreds of girls.
Yeah.
And I don't think successful businesses, successful. And you know what? There's God in there. I remember doing team dinners, and God comes up, and, you talk about abstinence and why it's important.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be like a used Kleenex for your husband, it always, and vice versa.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
But you want them to know God, because knowing God, they're able to put in to be more disciplined, to honor Him.
Well, everyone has to answer what I call the 3 big questions of life, and you will never have peace until you answer these questions. Where did I come from? Why am I here? What's going to happen when I die?
Right.
And so we all have to, you'll never have peace until you reconcile those. And some people say, well, where did I come from? I think we evolved. Okay, well, that's what you believe. I disagree, but that's, at least you're coming to some kind of reconciliation of those questions, right? But we all have to wrestle with that. And so you're in coaching, God used you
absolutely
to point girls to who He really is.
Yes.
And if that's all you ever did, that's a win. That's a huge win.
I 100% agree. And they might not recognize it now, but hopefully later they'll say, wow, like I look at my coaches. I mean, being fair, being honest, those are virtues that God gives us.
Giving each kid a shot. Yeah.
Yes. And my kids, my coaches and my dad gave me that. I hope they see that, down the road, that I might have had a little bit of impact in their life. Like I said,
a big impact in their lives.
I hope so.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for doing this. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.